Hello and welcome to the World of Game Design channel. I'm your host, Zach, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-creator, Brian Colin. Thanks for coming on the show, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm glad you're here. This is, I know I did a review of Grimm on the YouTube channel
hmm
a couple of months ago, and I think we've chatted before on a couple of different things. I know you were on our Gen Con, or I was on your Gen Con panel
Yep.
for Mork Borg, so it's been fun to chat with you, and I'm glad that you got another thing in the hopper and that we get to chat about it too.
Yeah, me too. It's always fun to be making new things and get creating things for other people to hopefully play in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm gonna assume then that but the fact that you've been on a few times, that we've talked about you both on the podcast and on the YouTube, I'm going to assume at this point that like most of our viewing audience knows who you are and kind of has an idea of what Baskrim is. We'll cover that a little bit, but
Sure.
what I'd like to do here is go a little bit deeper past the surface level into some of the details about these products that you're launching, because I think there's some cool stuff here. And this is an is it fair to say that this is an abnormal Kickstarter campaign in a few ways?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one, it's not really the core book because we did the core book on GameFound before, and I think we're going to be hitting people that don't know what it is yet, like
Yeah,
people that just haven't discovered it. So that's weird in itself. Also, like we're doing three books at once.
yeah,
They're not big books, but it's also three, which seems odd. I think will seem odd to a lot of people, but there are three things that didn't quite fit together in one volume,
mm-hmm,
but they were all things that I wanted to get out there.
yeah,
And we've got these crazy patches that don't really fit with the books, but I think they fit with like Bass Grimm and like the people that are playing.
yeah, yeah. There's like the patches angle, which let's just go ahead and dive in, I guess, to some of this. But like,
Sure.
the patches angle, I thought was interesting because it definitely has like this other vibe. Like when you look at like mothership patches as an example, like you get a crew patch for each one of these mothership projects that launches, and it's like a cool singular thing that is definitely tied to the product, but it's kind of like a standalone thing. Or if it has a larger context, it's within the entire scope of the game, right? Um, your patches, some of them are smaller, but they all have this like almost like a collector's approach from the very beginning of like these are here for you to build up a repertoire of or a collection of and swag out something in a way that feels almost more like pin trading or something like that, if that makes
Yes,
sense.
absolutely. And like part of it is they like I went with the honeycomb kind of pattern theme
Yeah.
so that they could interlock and fit together. And we have some patches that I've designed and gotten samples of that we haven't had made yet, like patches for GMs that run games at conventions
Oh yeah.
or people that make third party content and go to print with it. Like you do a third party Vast Grim project, you print it, make it out there in the world. I'm going to send you a patch that only those creators get because you're part of the Vast Grim horde at that point. And
Yeah.
so trying to make it like almost like a badge of honor that you wear.
Yeah, and I think like just going from the patches to the project as a whole, like this project to me, and I know it hasn't launched yet. This Vast Grim project launches on January 24th. But I got a little preview of it and got to look at the Kickstarter page, got to look at like the press kit and things like that. To me, this feels like, you know, the example that first comes to mind is just like the guy at the poker table that just pushing all his chips to the center, right? It's this communication of Brian is all in on this product line, this project. Does that
Yes.
make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you say it that way because like at the beginning or at the end of last year, like because I made all sorts of stuff, not just as part of the Infinite Black team, but also on my own on the side. I've been making all sorts of RPG related stuff, and I realized that if I'm going to be splitting my time amongst multiple projects and IPs, then none of them are going to be as strong as they could be if I just went dove all the way in. And that's why this new project has so many different things. I mean, from the Starship book to a like main adventure book that's set around this planet K2116b, and then a separate book that's all about space raiders and basically space pirates. They're all very different books, but
Uh-huh.
they all fit into the game.
Yeah, yeah. So like I'm super intrigued about this one just for that fact. Like it feels like we review a ton of Kickstarters. I think we just counted up and like on the main Geeks Can't show, we've reviewed over 500 different Kickstarters over the last few years, and so like
Wow.
we're used to it. Like I have a super backer. I've backed like 250 products myself in the game space. Like I see a ton of projects every week, and so looking at something like this, I'm like, oh, this is different, and different is always attractive to me. Even if it doesn't work out perfectly, I think this one has a good chance of working out great. But even if they don't work out, I'm always like drawn into somebody that's
Mhm.
really has a different way of doing things, and I think that in a lot of ways that's what this is. It feels like a um, hey, the Vast Grimm line, which if people don't know, Vast Grimm is this like I think you call it like a sci-fi punk version of Mork Borg, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. And
Totally.
yeah, and you like it stands alone. So you got the core rulebook that you kickstarted on or crowdfunded on GameFound, and that's out in the wild now. And then this Kickstarter is for like the expansionary content for it. But I think when I think about Vast Grimm, or when I think about Death in Space, when I think about Pirate Borg, these products that are kind of like Mork Borg adjacent right now, I think, man, they've got so much ground to catch up. Like, and if they're going to compete in this space and be viable and have the same thriving community as Mork Borg, which maybe none of these products will ever get quite to that level, but if they're going to have a
Yep.
chance of playing with the big dogs, they really need to like commit to this is a line that people want to
Hmm.
dive into to where they're going to have investment into because people right now I think in the morkboard community are spending hundreds of dollars a year on cheap products but a lot of products, and so their buy-in to morkborg is huge on
Hmm.
a individual community member customer level. And
Absolutely.
like I adore Vaskrim. I adore Pirate. I got my copy of Pirate Borg the other day. I think that's an amazing
Uh-huh.
book. Like all these are so great, and I'm like, oh, I want them to have that same robust community. I think what you're doing here is communicating that from the creator standpoint. You want to tell the larger RPG industry and fan base that you are 100% on board here, and I really like that. It's really great.
Yes. Yeah. I don't want the core book to be a one and done thing.
Right.
You know, this is something I want to grow, and I really want the community to get involved and start building on things and making their own rules and making their own settings and all that stuff. Because the more people that get into it, the more fun it is for everybody playing.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And that's where it's going to survive. That's where it's going to thrive is when the more, yeah, it's got to have constant supply of people onboarding and having plenty of resources to utilize once they get on there. Right. So I look at like, we'll use Morkborg. I just saw a conversation actually happening on a forum thread or something. And somebody said, are the creators of Morkborg ever going to put out another Morkborg thing? Right. And that was a
Hmm.
very telling request, right? Because what that person is really asking is how committed are the creators to this being a long-term product?
Right.
Um, and nobody really knows, or at least nobody in that thread knew like what the long-term plans for the brand were outside of Johan and Pele kind of handing the lion's share of it over to the community
Right.
and saying go have fun. But people do look to the creators. Like they look to
Right.
Johan still. They look to you for Vast Grimm. They
Yep.
look to Luke for Pirate Borg. They say, "What's next?" And you're
Yeah.
saying, "This is what's next."
And it's a little easier for me than probably Johan and Pele because
Yeah,
they both have full-time gigs,
right.
right? My full-time job is in the gaming industry with Infinite Black, so it's probably easier for me to dive into the next official release than they might be able to.
Right, right. But and that's a, like even if Johan and Pele said, "Hey, we've done our thing, we're moving on," like that's fine. I think that they've grown the community to the point where it's going to be robust with or without them at this point. But I think that I always am enheartened when I see a creator say, "No, this is a world that I want to live in. This is a world that I
Hmm.
want to participate in." And so I'm super excited about this project for a lot of different reasons. Getting into the products itself, we talked about the patches. So just looking at the three products, you mentioned them a little bit already, but you got three hardcover books, same proportions, same
Hmm.
dimensions as the core book or as the Morkborg book, but these are smaller. These are like, I think you said like 55 pages. Is that right? Somewhere in that
They're
range?
48 at the moment. We'll
48.
we'll see we'll see what happens with stretch goals and things.
Right on. Okay, yeah, that made sense. I was like, 55 is, I think, an impossible feat for a book to achieve because it's an uneven number.
Yeah.
But no, that's great. Perfect. So 48 pages. I think you did you did a Mork Borg book that was about the same size, right?
Exactly. Yep. And that was kind of like that was on my own, and that was kind of like my testing ground to see if I like the size. Because for me, I like hardcover books on my shelf.
Hmm.
I mean, I love zines. I love they're less expensive to produce, but
Hmm.
I want to see spine. I want to see the library grow, and
Yeah,
you can really see that with a hardcover. And 48's probably you don't really want to go smaller than that with a hardcover book.
sure.
But like a lot of the OSE books, like modules that I have, are
Hmm.
hardcover. They're 48 pages, and they work just great.
Yeah, I think the smaller dimensions of the book, right, where we're
Hmm.
not talking about an 8.5 by 11, 8.5 by 11 hardcover, that's 48 pages, feels small. It feels like
Sure, it feels like
why?
nothing.
Yeah,
Yep.
but I agree with you. I've got several. Well, I just got the Tales from Dungeon Deep guys. They did a hardcover print run of their stuff, and I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, this is very reasonable. I think this was like 70 pages, but I was like, yeah, this is perfect. So you got 3 books here, and I was fascinated by what you're choosing to put in each 3 of these books. So one's called Blood Altered, one's called Space Raiders, one's called Space Cruisers. And I thought I knew what you were getting into with each one of those. Like I'm like,
Uh-huh.
okay, if I was gonna guess, looking at Blood Altered, I'm like probably like cults or an adventure of some sort. Space Raiders is probably a big book of NPCs, and then Space Cruisers is probably a big book of spaceships and space travel. And I think to some extent, maybe I got some of that right, but then you kind of like fleshed out, I'm like, no, these are actually, I feel like there's a lot more utility in these books. And that's kind of the thing that I want to pick apart. You said so Blood Altered you have listed as a multi-adventure campaign with additional subclasses and monsters, right? And
Yes.
then Space Raiders says new classes, factions, and a hex crawl set in a region known as the Graveyard, filled with junker ships controlled by a Space Raider faction. So there's a lot of very interesting words in that one. And then Space Cruisers include Starship creation rules, space combat rules, and new locations. So of those 3, I think definitely it makes sense in my mind to say, hey, obviously space travel is this whole new thing that's not part of the Mork Borg book that we
Right.
need to dedicate some time to. So that one makes sense to be its own book to stand alone. I fully support that one, and I think you could like look at the cover and know what you're getting into there. Those other 2, though,
Yep.
I think are secretly really, really smart moves. Um, because I was just having a conversation this week with one of my team members, and I said,
Hmm.
I think that we should be moving away as a community. I think the community, the creators, the public are moving away from these like, here's a big book of resources as the default expansion for a thing, a bestiary or
Hmm.
whatever, right? And we
Sure.
instead of saying here's a big book of resources, we want a more targeted book of resources that then give examples or utilization for how you can put those resources into your world, right?
Yes.
Um, the D&D version of this is we have a monster manual, but then we have Volo's guide, right? And monster manual is
Right.
just 250 monsters, great, with a little paragraph for
Right.
each one, stat block, you move on. Volo's guide is actually secretly really great and brilliant as a book because it says here is a way more condensed set of monsters. Maybe I don't know, it's maybe 50 monsters, but
Hmm.
here's 5 different monster ecologies, right? Here's an ecology for
Hmm.
gnolls, here's an ecology for the undead, and here's how you can like utilize all these monsters in cool ways and insert them into your campaign. What I love about these 2 books is that you are putting in resources with things like new subclasses, new monsters, the idea of factions, and more classes again. Like all of these things are new resources, new modular things that you can tack onto your game, but then both of these have adventures of some
Yes.
sort and 2 different types of adventures.
Very different.
Right. And I don't know much more than what you say there, but what I see multi-adventure campaign, I feel like I know what that is.
Hmm.
Campaign told over shorter adventures, which is
Right.
my favorite way of doing a campaign. And then you also have a hex crawl, which I also adore, but those are 2 different types of experiences. And like the moment I read through that, I'm like, this is like Brian, I felt like you had really like sat down and really thought about what you wanted out of these books and what the user experience was going to be like, and you didn't just default to
I've tricked you.
right. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
So I mean, I did in a way, but really, as I made these, I was making stuff that I was excited about
Mm,
and things that I wanted to do, and I wanted to experience different things as I created, right?
yeah.
So like I didn't want to do the like I didn't want to make one where it's like okay, this is adventure, it's the same kind of thing. I wanted to play something different. I wanted to get to share something different. Like the hex crawl for me is really fun because it's on a space grid and you roll for the number of ships that you place, and you roll
Nice.
for the location that you point them, almost like Battleship, right?
Nice,
Where you place
nice.
them, and depending on how you run the game, they can be derelict ships. There can be things inside of them, so it can be as short or as long as the table wants it to be, with one key thing that's like kind of the end goal, and that's random as well. So it has a lot of replayability.
Yeah. Oh man, I like hearing you say that like you just wrote what you wanted because I think so often and I'm guilty of this, so I'll put myself in the unfortunate bandwagon, but like so often like creators just jump to the assumed thing. Like, well, I put out my core book, so I guess the next book is either a campaign book or it's a bestiary, right?
Hmm.
Um, and a campaign book should be X, and a bestiary should just be monsters or just be whatever. And like maybe that would work. I think that if you had put out a bestiary only, right, for Voskrim, it would have done well,
Yep,
right? But at the
sure.
end of the day, honestly, I think at this point, in at least my gaming career experience, I would say I know that I'm going to get way more use out of these books.
Absolutely.
Um,
And both the GM and the players get use out of these books,
right,
right? That's
right.
like, I mean, a player's going to read through a bestiary, but they're not going to use it nearly as much as a GM. And I want everybody to get to enjoy it. And also, if I were to just put a whole bunch of, just spend like a long time just making all monsters or creatures and things like that, I'd probably get a little bored. Like,
Yeah.
I like variety in my workflow.
Right. Yeah. And Colville actually, I don't do you watch Colville or MCDM much at
Every
all?
now and
Every
again,
now and then.
but not regularly.
He said something recently in one of his videos that I thought was very interesting, and I think I largely agree with. He said the secret to making a viral, exciting RPG that people want to buy is presenting them with cool character options and class options that they
Uh-huh.
look at and say, "I want to play that. I want to
Yes.
play that creature, that character, that class, that whatever." If you can do that, nothing else matters nearly as much.
Right.
And I thought that was very interesting. I'm like, oh, I sat on it for a while. I'm like, oh well, we know in the RPG industry that game masters spend the most money, right? Like
Hmm.
far and above. Players don't spend nearly as much money as game masters. But I think he's right in that secretly every game master gets excited about a product because they imagine themselves as a player, right?
Yes, absolutely. And if you're as the GM, your players are excited about the classes and the characters they're playing, that's just going to make it a better experience for you. The classes in the Space Raiders book, there's so much weird, goofy stuff that my family and I just adore because I put things in references to strange things that we were just into.
Give me an example of one of the class names in that Space Raiders book.
So a subclass are killer clowns. And my daughter's favorite movie as of Halloween was Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Nice.
So there's a lot of little references to that movie, and like one of the pieces of equipment is balloon animals, and they're filled with, depending on the color balloon, it's filled with a different toxin. So
Mm.
like little strange things like that.
I love that. And yeah, like, gosh, that's the sort of, like as soon as you say like space clowns, like I think like I immediately go back to D&D just put out Spelljammer, right? And they put out their
Hmm.
box set of that, and space clowns were in there, and that was one of the things that people brought up frequently. It's like, wow, this feels very out of place for D&D, but like the idea of space clowns is very like captures the imagination, right?
Right.
And that's a great thing about the core Morkborg book. It's a great thing about your Vaskrim book is like Morkborg is all about this whole every iteration of it that I've seen so far is all about capturing the imagination, hooking you with a cool idea, and letting you kind of like help fill in the gaps after that,
Yes.
right? So super down for that. Um, what other things have I not brought up that you think are really cool about these books or the Kickstarter in general?
So I was scared of doing the Starship stuff at first,
Mm,
right? Because there's lots of people that are super crunchy with Starship rules, and this is all very light and it feels very much in line with Mork Borg and how
hmm
that game works. And the ship building process is the same as character building. So if you wanted to do it
Ah,
randomly, you'd roll a d6 and you would get one of the classes. Then you'd roll a d6 and get that type of ship within that class. And so it has a very similar. If you're familiar with character generation, it'll fit right. It'll
mm.
just be natural. I've changed the stats that ships have, but it has a very similar flow.
Do you think like when you start rolling dice at the table when you're in your ship and you're in a ship combat and whatnot, like do you feel like the play style of ship combat is similar to what you would expect from like a Mork Borg combat, like a
Yeah,
character combat?
absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Just because each player takes on different roles within the starship, very similar to like after playing Pirate Borg, a game that Luke ran, I was like, I can do this. I felt confident in doing it after I played that.
Good, good. Yeah, I was wondering if maybe you had picked Luke's brain about how he does his ship combat. That's cool. And I think Mork Borg really creates an easy access point to things like ship combat because it's theater of the mind by and large, right?
Right,
So we already are not having to discuss the fact, like in D&D terms, if you were going to do it, everybody expects a grid. Well, if you're all in a spaceship in D&D, like theoretically it could be cool, but somebody's going to get to do movement and other people are not, which is one of the
right.
fun things if you're on a grid with, cool tokens and whatnot. Like, oh,
Yep.
I'm the only person that gets to move it. Okay, but with Morkborg though, like the idea is it's all in your head or it's with your head with some helpful handouts or whatever. Like
Hmm.
it movement and your place and relative positioning to everything still has a purpose, but it's way less impactful at the table and it feels way less like a cool thing that you get to do and nobody else gets to do, would be my imagining.
Right. I mean, and so like each ship has different amounts of modifications. Like they have different mod slots with
Oh, okay.
some may be weapons, some may be different things. So one person may be the captain and they may be flying the ship and deciding which direction to go or if they need to turn, whereas somebody else may be doing that, or somebody else is holding down the defenses on the ship when you're getting attacked. So trying to make it so everybody gets to do something and nobody is just left with one person calling all the shots is really the
Hmm.
goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm okay. That's super cool, and I love the idea of like anytime you have a vehicle, a ship, a boat, a a, a, a safe house, a keep, like anything that is a communally owned uh, object from the perspective, I always think the first thing that I want to do as a player, first thing my group wants to do is they want to modify it. They want to improve it. They
Yep.
want to fortify it. They want to tweak it out. They want to paint it. They want to, right? Like those are the things that players get excited about. I think is taking something and making it their own. It's the Millennium Falcon, right? Like it's that
Right.
idea of like it's not just a YT-1300. It's
Right.
YT-1300 with 1,000 cool little things that you'll only discover once you get into it, right?
Yes.
It's
Totally.
I'm that excites me to no end. And my expectation then would be you talked a little bit about world exploration, but moving forward with that book already now in place, I could imagine adventures, campaigns, things like that, where part of the reward and part of the agenda for diving into those things is ship modifications, right? It's another
Yes.
form of loot at that point that we can
Exactly.
insert into the game. That's cool. Yeah.
Hopefully there will be third party generated tables of all sorts of ship modifications, ship tributes, like the magic in Vast Grimm is tributes instead of scrolls.
Right.
So there's a thing called like that are starship tributes that can't be, they're not like for individual use, but for a starship, that's something else that can be totally fun and added to it.
That's very cool. So, all right. So let's pretend for a moment I think we got a good context of the books and what's inside them. Let's pretend for a moment. I don't think it's hard to pretend that these are going to fund. You're going to be making these books. You get those behind you and they're out on the shelves. Like what sort of other things? I'm not necessarily looking for like what's the next book you're writing. Gosh darn it, you're just
Sure.
making three, right? Like I should be asking for more. But what I am curious about is like what ways are you looking at growing the Vascrim community outside of just releasing books?
Sure. So we're going to do a jam later this year, a game jam. We already have the game jam patch for people that participate in that. That's designed. We have samples of it. So I really want to try and encourage that. There's at least one person. If you go to Kickstarter now and do a search for Vastrim, there's one third party project that's going to launch during Zine Month
Oh, cool.
or Zine Quest. So we're hoping that will grow. We the very first volatile verse that we printed with the first crowdfunding. We have issue 2, 3, and 4 scheduled for this
Hmm.
year. So every other month, starting in April, we're going to have monthly releases. One will be not be that, but it'll be a smaller adventure that we're working on. That's one of them's already in production. So we're going to keep putting things out there because what I've found, at least with the people that are on the Infinite Black Discord, people that aren't necessarily writing a lot of their own game content,
Hmm.
they're burning through content really fast. Like they're running a game and then they're waiting for more.
Right.
So I'm hoping as we put more stuff out, other people start putting more stuff out. So it'll just kind of start to snowball throughout 2023.
You had talked a little bit early on about the Vast Grim Horde, right? This group
Yep.
of creators that you're hoping to draw in, and you already got some. What talk to me about that process? If somebody's watching this video, or maybe I want to write a Vast Grim thing later. Like,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
It's super easy. If we have it on the website where you can go to the link, it has the copy that you have to include. There's a logo. You have to include the Mork Borg compatible
Yeah.
information because we follow their license since it's under there. So it's basically like essentially having two of those, and then you can just. We also have a. You can click on a writing style guide document that I've created that kind of outlines how we tend to
Oh,
write things and
nice.
how the flow needs to go. There's a link to a font PDF of the fonts that are used in the core book. And so resources to try and help. And then once, if I know it's out there, we have a page on the site where there's links to people's itch pages and things like that, because I want to try and make sure that we help foster that growth.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Cool. Okay, so I see a lot of things that way. I know that you're already planning on. I see you at a million conventions. So one way or another, Brian is going to be
Yep.
at conventions this year. But any plans for Vastgrim on the convention side of things? If people are,
Sure. So Gen Con is definite. So on the business side of things, Infinite Black will be at Gamma.
uh-huh.
And so hopefully getting it into more retail stores and more distributors. Then we've got a booth at Origins. I've applied for Gamehole Con, and uh, we'll plan on doing PAX Unplugged again.
Right on. Cool. So
So,
several places if you want to come check Vastgrim out in person. Several
oh,
places that way.
we also just are about to sign a contract with Gehenna Gaming, and they're going to be running games at conventions that we're at or not at for a good chunk of the time. So,
Nice, nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. So
yeah.
you'll get to play Vastgrim in some of these locations. See, that's great. That's perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, look, this has been great. Any other things that before we close out that you wanna throw at people?
No, I'm if it goes up before the Kickstarter launches, there's a couple of contests you can win a crazy rad Vasgrim skateboard. Also, one of the starships that I built that's part of the thing. So there's a couple of giveaways to try and get more people excited too.
What do people need to do in order to get involved in those giveaways?
I will send you the links. Would that
Perfect.
work?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Awesome.
I'll put all the links down in the show notes for everybody. So yeah, and I'll put we'll put links down to the of course to the crowdfunder and to everything Vastgrim. We don't have to muck with that. But yeah, great, perfect. This has been amazing. I'm super excited about this. Again, launching January 24th, 2023. Thank you so much, Brian, for popping on.
Thank you.
All
I
right,
appreciate it.
awesome. Well, good luck, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.